Ultraman Ginga has arrived to help defend Action Figure City from Action Figure Kaiju.
Hey everyone, it's me, Gazbot, and it's day 83. Day 83 of 100 days of making comics. That's when I spend 30 minutes, at least, each day spending time on my own personal project. You know, I often start off with like a character, a booming intro voice, and then kind of turn back into me. But then periodically I'll switch out of it, so don't worry, I don't stay normal for long. Yeah, this is the thing that many of us are doing. Some have finished, some have started again. But I am on a daily. Remember what I said about not staying normal? I am on day 83 of 100, so I am closing in on my personal finish line. And today is Sunday, so I thought I was going to take it a little easy, and I kind of did. But I was very lazy yesterday, so I didn't want to be that lazy. And I finished a page of coloring for the Earthling, which was the end of the first batch of pages. This is not my own stuff, this is client work, but it's comic related, it's part of my day, and so I'm going to throw that up. I'm going to do the crossfade where you see the pencils I was given and the colors I did, and then...
I'm flying. Oh, I'm in color.
Oh, you're back. So, okay, there's that. That was... you know, the bigger part of my work day. I did a few other things, but then I put in about 2 hours on the Horror A4, which is my own personal comic. A good chunk of that was working on roughs for page 12, and this page is kind of a nightmare in a way because every panel has perspective. And every panel has weird curves because it all takes place inside this subway type thing, which I call the Stansport tube, which is sort of just a roundish, bigger subway car. But so the whole page is two people on the car talking, but because of that I tried to give it different angles and stuff. I just didn't want like heads, which is good to do, but it also results in me needing to do completely different perspective. And in the panel I did, there's only like 4 lines behind them, but they needed to be correct. And then the people sitting them need to be correct. And it just took me forever. I worked on it for 2 hours. The actual drawing was maybe an hour and a half of this panel, which is nuts because it's not even a finished panel. And all the panels on this page so far have been difficult in that way. And not that they're horribly difficult, but just super time consuming. As you saw from the process video I did on the first panel, or the speed process if you're just watching the 100 days video, which is fine. You don't need to watch that process video. But I'll put that up here. I did like a couple different iterations of like the original and then the roughs to the more finished roughs, which again I guess are like arguably like rough pencils at this point. There were other iterations in between where like I kind of cleaned up the rough and it looked weird and I redrew the head and stuff, but these were just the main milestones, so I will them to you.
We are rough. We have box. We are red rough. We are red rum. We are finished.
They were them to you. And so that was not a lot of work, despite not a lot of output for the work I put in. And I talk about this a lot. I struggle with perfectionism and using my time economically, but it's not like, oh, it has to be perfect. It just has to be good enough, and sometimes it takes me a long time to get it good enough. And would I like to go back in and redraw it a few more times? Certainly. Am I going to redraw it at least once? Yes, when I ink it. Possibly more than once. But more and more I find myself, typically I would do small thumbnails, big layout thumbnails, pencils, inks, and then color wash or whatever. So 4 steps just to get to inks. And more I find myself kind of merging step 2 and 3 into one. So the full-size layout and the pencil, well, I call pencil, I'm not actually penciling, into one step. So it's sort of like a 3.5 step now. So it's taking longer, but I keep reminding myself that I'm doing more work there. Anyway, what about that other half hour? Because I said I did about 2 hours of work. Right. Well, the first thing I did was word balloons, which actually I will show you in a second. I just sort of placed them all over, and there's a lot of dialogue on this one, and so it was really important to figure out where it was going to go. And as you can see, a lot of it covers up what I had sort of drawn in that panel, which is usually like, oh, I wasted all that effort and everything. But, well, A, there's something to be said for drawing through and just completing the drawing so that the parts you can see are correct. But I'm also probably going to trim the dialogue, because a lot of it is this guy just yammering the boots, like, hey, blah, 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 blah. So I'm probably going to cut some of that. I could edit it because it's, you know, it's not a really important what he's saying, just that he's yammering at her. And I might do like artistic stuff, like put the balloon behind her and just the words keep going and things like that. So I'm not terribly worried about that, but I wanted to at least get a baseline. But anyway, here's where I put like my speech bubbles to begin with, in this area. And imagine if there's a big red, hi, how are you doing? But no, I'm not a cartoon. Well, not really. So anyway, that still wasn't quite 2 hours. The other thing I was doing, you know, I've been catching up on the 100s, specifically Scott Serkland, which I mentioned before. I'll put his link below. I just got done watching his day 99, so tomorrow I will watch his final video. It's funny because I feel like he's doing it, but he did it a while ago, but I still feel like I just went on the journey with him. But anyway, he does something at the beginning of almost all of his videos where he talks about his comic, and he gives a little pitch about, you know, what it is, and so, you know, like kind of the elevator pitch, or the sitting behind a table and like tell somebody 2 seconds. And I kind of realized that I don't really have that. I've never really tried to do that. I've explained it to people that ask me about it, but I'm, you know, the sort of short pitch that I don't even know that I've ever done on one of these videos, other than that people know there's a monster in it. And kind of the short version, if I had no time and like was like literally like, what is it? I'm like, yeah, have you ever seen Godzilla? It's kind of like that, you know. But that's not a really good pitch, and it's not even really true. It's just that there's a giant monster, and that's where the similarity begins and ends, you know. But to some people, you know, there isn't a distinction between Pacific Rim and Godzilla and Cloverfield and Gamera and Rodan. Like, to them, they're all the same thing. And if you look at it that way, maybe it is the same thing. Although I also am not focusing super heavy on the monster so much as the people in that world. And so this is, the point is, this whole thing I just told you is not a good pitch. You know what I mean? I couldn't be like, well, here's a bunch of stuff, and I didn't even really get to the point. But I struggled with finding a concise description that also didn't give away major plot points or anything, because, like, you know, if I was going to talk about, what's a movie everyone's seen? Well, I don't even want to say a movie everyone's seen, but let's say there's some movie that ends with all the books in the world disappear. And that was like the comic I was writing. My temptation would be to be like, oh, it's a story about people living in this crazy world, and then at the end, all the books disappear. That might be a great hook, and it might be like the fun part of the story, but you don't want to tell people that. And so, you know, not that I have a big, you know, M. Night Shyamalan twist ending type thing at the end, but I don't want to, the cool parts of the story are kind of things that come later, not even in the first issue, that I don't want to give away. Not that the first issue isn't cool, but you know what I'm saying. It's like you don't want to say, you don't want to give it away. But give it away, give it away, give it away now. Give it away. Red Hot Chili Peppers, no? Flea was in Back to the Future. Anyway, that's so not anything. Okay, so what I've been doing is trying to work on a pitch. And when I say what I've been doing, I mean like about, 15 minutes tonight. And I talked to Q a little bit about it, and she helped me. It's not there yet, but I've kind of sort of halfway boiled it down to this that I'm going to read to you fellows and ladies. And so feedback is welcome on ways. Obviously, you don't know the story, so you can't. It's hard to be like, well, you should talk about that aspect of the story. And it's probably a little bit wordier than it needs to be. But I'm imagining this is the situation, not the elevator pitch to some Marvel Comics guy or some Paramount Studios guy or whatever. But like, I'm at my table. No one knows who I am. I got some prints, doing some sketches. I have a comic. Oh, you got a comic, and it's the Horror A4 issue 1. Oh, what's this? The Horror A4. What do I say? Now, I'm imagining I get a sentence or two. Some people might want to sit there and talk to me for a while, and then I could get into it pretty well, Or some people might ask as they're walking by, in which case I'll be like, it's like Godzilla! But assuming I get the kind of average 2 sentences, I'm going to try to go with saying something like this. And I'm not going to say this as a pitch to you people right now. I'm going to speak to you more like I'm talking to a teacher. You're my teacher, Mr. and Mrs. You. Okay, so in a world where kaijus, and now this is one of the things I wrestle with, I have in parentheses, giant monsters like Godzilla, because like not everyone knows what a kaiju is, and I was also thinking like I should say Daikaiju, because that's large monster, but people know kaiju from Pacific Rim, so maybe I should be like, it's like Pacific Rim. Anyway, I digress, let me start over. In a world where kaijus and Kodai, now this word's even less known, it's giant superheroes like Ultraman, so I imagine I might have to say that, or I might just say giant superheroes like Ultraman. In a world where kaijus and Kodai exist, it's been close to a century since the last time somebody saw one. Okay, straightforward. But now a new monstrous threat has appeared. Huh? Now clearly this will be the horror. And they're like, I know who this is going to be just based on the cover. And I'm like, hold on, you, let me finish my little pitch. And then they walk away like, what an uppity artist. And I'm like, nobody likes me. Anyway, so a new monstrous threat has appeared. The military assigns it the designation of Alpha Level 4 UBO. Now, if they ask, I'll say that's an unclassified biological organism. They probably won't ask. It's military jargon that doesn't exist. The point is that it's an Alpha Level 4, which sounds bad, and it is. It's the highest, Alpha Level 4, that's the worst. But, and this is back to the script, but most people call it the horror. Oh, it's designated A4, Alpha 4, and it's the horror A4, I get it. Well, there you go. And then now they're so happy with discovering anyway. But most people call it the horror due to its grotesque features. This is the story, and this is the important part to distinguish it, that it's not about Godzilla. It's not about the horror. I mean, obviously it is, but you know what I mean. This is the story of people living in that uncertain reality. And it had other weird taglines like, living in a way they thought only to exist behind them in history, living in a world they had all but forgotten. Variations on that. So that's kind of, this needs work, I know, but this is like my first pass. But basically what I'm trying to get across is there's a world where lots of different Godzilla-type monsters and lots of different Ultramen. And if you don't know who Ultraman is, it's kind of Japan's Superman. It's the guy grows really big like Godzilla and fights Godzilla monsters. And there's many of them. So in a world, where there do exist giant monsters and giant heroes, but they have all disappeared, died, gone away, whatever. And it's been 100 years since someone's seen them, so they've sort of fallen into myth. They're kind of believed, but I mean, if you think about our own history, it's like 2014. 1914 was like, what happened then? I mean, we have records, but could you imagine living then? It's like, that's a whole different world. Like, oh, I'm going to go to the outhouse, and I have no electricity, really, and, it's like another planet. And so what's happened with this is that's kind of, for them, that world where those things existed, they did exist for real, and they have evidence stuff, but it's like nobody thinks about living in that world anymore. And all of a sudden a monster shows up. And it's like, what do we do? I don't know. And then, you see the monster rip stuff up and have a lot of fun, cool stuff like that. But we also follow several different characters and how they're dealing with it and how it affects them. And it's more about the people in the world than the monster itself. And that's the story as I'm explaining it to you guys. So that, I think what I just said is not a terrible pitch, but it's not a fast pitch. That's the pitch for someone that's really interested in sitting at my table and chatting with me. That's the pitch for somebody who's a fellow artist, a fellow writer, someone who's a big comic fan, who's into this kind of stuff, and then I could get into more minutia depending on how interested they are. But that concise pitch to get that point across is kind of what I was given in the beginning. But even just stuff like I said, where I guess I could say giant monsters rather than kaiju or daikaiju, or Godzilla-type monsters for people that aren't familiar with that sort of genre. But then Kodai is a word I'd like to use because it exactly describes what I'm talking about. But I realized I didn't even know that word until a few years ago. So then, okay, well, giant heroes like Ultraman. But while almost everyone knows Godzilla, not everyone knows Ultraman. And then it's like, well, what would be the next thing? Like Gypsy Danger from Pacific Rim? But I know a lot of people that haven't seen Pacific Rim. And most people that have don't necessarily remember the robot was called Gypsy Danger. And it wasn't a world of robots fighting kaijus. It was a world of superheroes, so then I'm like, well, imagine if like Wolverine, was 130 feet tall, so it's a little bit inside baseball if I get too much into that. So, I guess just giant monsters and giant heroes used to fight. And anyway, I'm going on too long. I've given you what you need. I need to work on it myself, but if anybody has suggestions, feel free to post them about just a good way to get that pitch across. And of course, from what you've seen so far, Boots, the girl, is sort of the main character. We focus on her a lot. There are other characters as well, but I don't know if I should worry about explaining her in the pitch. Like, is it like, oh, we follow the people, specifically this one girl, Boots, and blah, blah, it's like, does that matter? People can figure that out when they start reading it, I suppose. So, it's a little ways away that I got to figure that out, but it's probably better to start thinking now. And Mr. Serkland from Serkworks has got my noodling. So yeah, that's that. Moving on, tomorrow it's a weekday, so I'm back in like work mode, although obviously I worked today. I have a few more pages to color on the Earthling, although I haven't been given them yet, which is making me a little nervous because they need to be done. Their deadline, I think, to publish issue 1 is April 1st, and they need the pages for me. They're having me color before the letterist does it, I think. I don't know. I know somebody gets it after. Maybe it's just the publisher. So they need it by a certain time. But we agreed on the 10th of March, which even if they decided to extend it, I can't because I'm going to Japan. So, like, that's my deadline, but I need the pages. Because, like, I wanted to do another page tomorrow because I think I have... It's either 6 or 7 pages left, and considering coloring a page on average takes me about a day. You know, not necessarily a full day, but with all the other stuff I do, I could comfortably get a page done a day. And so right now I'm not too worried, but if I don't get it for like a week or two, I am, especially because other things I have to take care of and whatever. I got one more caricature I have to do. If I don't get a coloring page, I'll probably do the caricature tomorrow. And who knows, maybe the delay in getting the pencils will result in more work on the horror tomorrow, which would not hurt my feelings, but, you know, still, there's also a few things I need to still get ready for Japan and just other life stuff I need to take care of. But things are good. Things are well. Things are good well. Good well. When you need things that are good and well. Good well. I wish there was a company named Goodwell, and they make cookies out of wells. Rock with water that's dirty in between. It's a Goodwell. What? Why? No. Okay, so that is the end of today. The end of today, numbered 83. And that means... there's 17 days left.